I'd like to acknowledge our traditional owners, the Garma clan of the Yolngu Nation, feeling very incredibly comfortable here on this country because of the way that we've been welcomed, invited here. I bring greetings from Central Australia, from the Ngazara Pitanjara Yankudanjara women of the NPY region, the cross-border region which covers WA, South Australia and the Northern Territory, where we work in 26 communities covering 350,000 square kilometres. People seem to have a bit of problems mentioning the NPY Women's Council. We've had the NPI, Tony Jones, and we even had people call us the NYPD. It's obviously a very popular TV show. Also like to extend a wonderful thanks to Denise Bowden. I don't know whether she's here, but let's just give her a hand. She's been incredible leading this incredible festival over many years, and obviously capably supported by Sean. And the invitation to speak about the Closing the Gap refresh today. We've got half an hour, Ian, so I'll be quite brief because actually Ian's going to talk about the more current work around the refresh. I also want to acknowledge my council members. Firstly, Jambawa Marawili, who may be here. I want to acknowledge that he is in sorry business, and I extend my love and support to him this morning. Fraser Nye is here as well from the Torres Strait. Fraser is sitting quietly there, which is very unusual. I just want him to stand up so you can see him. This is Fraser from the Torres Strait. I'd like to acknowledge my co-chair, Roy RC, and two other council members, Suzanne Murphy and Professor Nori Brown. As an Aboriginal woman, I'm Ngazara through my father and Crony through my mother. Hearing about the past 10 years of the Closing the Gap national project was hard to hear, particularly last year when I became a member of the council. The past 10 years, they have been dire as far as the results, and they have been years of wasted opportunities. I would call this era, the last 10 years, the wasted years. At the first meeting of the IAC last year in February, we discussed our priority projects for the year, including Closing the Gap refresh. We agreed we needed to set a new tone of accountability. I'm talking about the IAC and the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. Our accountability to Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander leaders and peak bodies and communities. And importantly, in relation to the Closing the Gap refresh, there was a strong sense that it should not be rushed. We also committed to elevate the governance mechanisms and cultural authority of our communities through the consultation. We all know that we have our own operating rhythms of governance, and through the consultation we needed to draw on these principles, to draw on this operating rhythm. This rhythm today, and we've been hearing about it over this weekend, that we want to live well in both worlds. And for the Closing the Gap effort to have success, we believe that the governance and operating rhythms really needed to be elevated in the Closing the Gap refresh. So I just want to talk about that as a backdrop to what I'm about to say in terms of what's happened over the last 18 months. So we met last year, we talked about the work that was needed around the Closing of the Gap refresh. Obviously looked at the last 10 years, previous year, knowing that we needed to improve, knowing that it wasn't just about a national project where the commitment was required from not just the federal government but from all governments state and territory governments, but also we needed to have the settings right so that the agency of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, individually as well as collectively, was going to be activated. We have the Closing the Gap refresh as a standing item at all of the IAC meetings, and so there's been a lot of discussion. And we've had obviously regular briefings from senior staff of the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. So last year, again, around this commitment to accountability, we met with the co-chairs of the National Congress of Australia's First People, talked about how we would work together to get a better outcome through the process. And so through the consultation, the Congress has been involved and participating in roundtable meetings. Importantly, in February this year, we had a special gathering of significant Indigenous Australians. It was hosted by the Prime Minister and Cabinet in Canberra, and it was specifically focused on informing him of the Closing the Gap refresh, and it was the Indigenous leaders giving their counsel and advice to the Prime Minister. At the end of the special gathering, there was a meeting with a few representatives meeting with COAG. There was a statement given to COAG, and it also, in my view, set the tone that it was not just going to be a responsibility reported on annually by the Australian Prime Minister, but by all First Ministers together with the Prime Minister. So that special gathering was very significant. So then we started the engagement process, holding 18 national roundtables and holding conversations right across the nation. There were also a number of regional and local engagements led by states and territories. And so I'm hoping that many of you have attended that, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here today. So over 1,000 participants have engaged in those roundtables, and those presentations have been conducted by the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. We had an opportunity to invite submissions from the public. We had a number of submissions received from Indigenous organisations, up to around 170 submissions, which is fantastic. Many of them peak organisations. And we also had a number of submissions from mainstream organisations. It's no surprise that from the national gathering and from the consultation, the message is that it's not just around the topics in the Closing the Gap. The Closing the Gap refresh needs to be holistic. It needs to represent how we activate change in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. What are those levers? And also importantly, what's the sequence of how that change happens so that we do get the results that we're all hoping for. In May and June this year, IAC members attended technical workshops based on the consultations to inform the development of draft targets and indicators. The first workshop was held in Sydney with 70 subject matter experts, including representatives from Indigenous organisations and communities, academia and government taking part. Working with the information gathered during the consultation process, participants collaborated to identify core issues and ideas that will drive greater opportunities and life outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. A list of possible targets and indicators were identified at the second and final Closing the Gap refresh technical workshop. Outcomes from the first technical workshop were further considered and analysed with a strong focus on data, including how targets are measured and reported against. And this work around data and using data to hold us all accountable is really vital, not only in the revised Closing the Gap agenda, but as we finalise the plan and then start to implement the plan. I'd just like to touch on finally that with the volume of consultation and the volume of counsel and advice coming to us from the community, it's no surprise that the areas are being considered to be broadened around child protection, family safety, justice, culture, trauma and healing. And as a major provider of human services in the NPY region, those areas I've just mentioned are critical areas for change in our community. So we're just not having a very compartmentalised set of targets. We want to see them sitting around a holistic wellbeing and culture framework. We like the word prosperity in the NPY region. We don't like poverty. We want prosperity. We want Arnagul to be living well in two worlds. So we like the prosperity framework because it gives us a vision to work towards. So I'd like to hand over to Ian Anderson. I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the incredible work that Ian has led within the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. There's a saying, cometh the man, cometh the hour. This is the man. The timing is right, the leadership is right, his skill sets are right. His colleagues are nodding because they're agreeing. Marcia's nodding, she's agreeing. I was reflecting on the discussion yesterday around constitutional recognition and thinking over the period of my life. Outside of my parents, many of the decisions of my life are made by non-Aboriginal people. And I actually am looking forward to having pretty smart, savvy people like Ian Anderson and Marcia Langdon actually making decisions for me. So I think possibly they may make better decisions than the current arrangement. Thanks, Ian.